Um, so back in the early 2000s, I was working at a church as an associate minister in the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C. And I was associate minister. I was the creative arts guy. I was the kind of the young adult minister, and I preached about once a month. And I did a lot of the creative pieces. Often they were, not always, but often they were fun or funny or comedy pieces. And so another guy, a good buddy of mine that has been here to Momentum many times, Tim Jones, he was the king of anything live. When we did something live to set up the topic, he was the king of that. I was more of the video guy. Like, I like to create and script videos and to produce videos and all that. And so one day we were shooting one of Tim's videos. Me and an intern were out by ourselves, and we were shooting a video that Tim had written. And we were out driving around. It was a parody song. And so I was riding around with this intern. I said, man, I ought to write a parody on how I am attracted to ladies who would carry a big Bible. And he was like, that sounds ridiculous. And I was like, I know, it's perfect for me, you know? And so I started freestyling right there. I was like, what about like, I like big Bibles and I cannot lie. You Christian brothers can't deny. And I did about the first 4 to 6 lines. He was like, dying laughing. He was like, you got to write that song right now. So within the next couple days, I went over to Starbucks and was sitting there, for a few hours just writing and just cracking up to myself, writing the song and putting it together. And the idea was, I kind of want to, it's going to glorify godly women who love God, love God's word. It's going to talk about how much I love God's word itself, the Bible, the scriptures, but it's also going to do a whole bunch of tongue-in-cheek satire, poking fun at the Christian subculture. No one uses the word midriff but Christians, okay? And so just all kinds of stuff to poke fun at the Christian subculture. And so I thought, you know what? I might perform this song live at our church to set up a topic one day, or something like that. But then I started writing another comedy song that as I wrote it, I started to feel like, this is pretty funny. And I was like, you know what? It would be fun. I should record these and make like a comedy song album, just of really stupid songs that are fun. And so I set out to record my first album, which was entitled The Caucasian Invasion. And it's based on one song in the CD that's I Can Only Imagine, a parody of I Can Only Imagine by Mercy Me. But basically the concept is, what if there are too many white people in heaven and they ruin worship? Just like being offbeat and stuff. So that's the whole song. And so The Caucasian Invasion was the name of the first album. So the first song I ever recorded was Baby Got Book. And, it's a parody of Sir Mix-a-Lot, for those of you that don't know. A parody of Sir Mix-a-Lot's Baby Got Back. To this day, when I travel around the country and speak for students or men or churches or whatever, people often come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, you're the guy that did that song, your song Baby Got Back. And I'm like, I didn't do that one. I think you're mistaken. I'm not positive, but you might want to Google it. And so I decided to shoot a music video for this song once I recorded it. And I thought this will be the last big creative video I'll do before we move, as we planned to Cleveland, Ohio, to start a church called Momentum Christian Church. So it'll be the last one. Me and Shannon actually were tag team speaking that morning together. And so we showed this video, and the church loved it. They just loved it. And one guy came up to me afterward. He said, could you put that online so my mom in California can watch it? I would love for her to see it. Sure, do that. So put it up on my website, which is whiteboydj.com. And I put it up on my website. And it went viral the day that our daughter, Aslan, was born. So February 1st, 2005. It's 19 years old now. And so the 10th anniversary remix, Baby Got Book X, is about 10 years old now. And so it went viral, went nuts. I got the call in the hospital. Aslan had just been born. And I got the call a little bit later on my flip phone. What's up? And they were like, this video's going nuts. It's getting hundreds of thousands. Now, this is before YouTube. YouTube hadn't launched yet. When you wanted to look up a video online back in the day, you went to iFilms to be like, what was that Super Bowl commercial I saw? Or if it was a dumb video, let me go to stupidvideos.com. It was all over the place. You didn't have a central place. So it was one of the pioneering viral videos along with Charlie Bitmay. Anybody? Yeah, like some of the original, kind of viral videos. And so it went crazy. and it spread. It was on VH1. It was on CNN multiple times. New York Times mentioned it in an article about another topic. Wake-up shows around the country on regular mainstream radio stations were calling me and asking me to do interviews to talk to a pastor about a dumb comedy song that I did. And Sir Mix-a-Lot's manager sent me a mean email telling me that Anthony Ray, a.k.a. Sir Mix-a-Lot, thought it was really funny, but the manager didn't. He didn't think it was very funny, and he told me to cease and desist, which is not official if it's not in writing by a lawyer. So he emailed it to me and said, cease and desist, and I said, nope. And so that really was done with. After a couple of mean words, he texted me sent me an email, which I was able to deal with spiritually. I just moved on. And so today, when you Google it or Spotify it, like I said, Baby Got Book X is the far superior version, the 10th anniversary version. But now everywhere I travel and speak, I travel about once a month. That doesn't always include a Sunday, but to go speak somewhere and do something. And everywhere I go, eventually the tie is put together. Like, how do I know you? What do I know you from in this weird Christian subculture of where I'm speaking at? Like, oh my gosh, you're the Baby Got Book guy. You're the Big Bibles guy. You're the, they always have different words for, you're the I like Big Bibles. So everywhere I go, I am known as, it's well documented, I am the dude who loves God's word. And guilty as charged, man. Like, I love the scriptures. I love the stuff that I've learned all my life from the Bible. When I grew up in a non-religious home, an unchurched home, but like discovering the scriptures. So that's me. So almost 20 years it's gone by, and we've never really leaned into this as a church, ever. It's been 19 years, and for the first time, we're going to do an I Like Big Bibles series. And so this is not something that we've done a lot. Like, hey, let's show my video again. If you're a first timer, you're like, man, this guy's a narcissist. But we don't do this. So we thought we'd lean into it. So ladies and gentlemen, I confess to you today, I really like big Bibles. And so on that note, Vince Lombardi, some of you know, classic. We're going to hear his name a lot in the next month or so because the Super Bowl trophy is named after Vince Lombardi, classic coach of the Green Bay Packers. And he coached them in the 1960s, and back before the Super Bowl era, he led the Packers to 3 NFL championships within 5 years, before the Super Bowl started. So this is like BC. This is like pre-YouTube, like that's an accomplishment before the Super Bowl even started. And so then they won the first 2 Super Bowls for anybody that knows football. Well, some of those championships beforehand are hidden. Basically, he won 5 championships in 7 years. I mean, just a brilliant, brilliant coach. Well, Lombardi was obsessed with teaching and reteaching the fundamentals of the game to his players. And so it's just renowned that when he would walk into training camp, before the season started, he didn't take anything for granted. He pretended that every player was a clean slate and didn't know anything about football, even though they probably won the championship the year before. So they come to training camp day one, he just starts as clean slates, and often he would come out, and this is the way he began. Day one, gentlemen, this is a football. That's how he began. And he would begin by saying, okay, we're going to go to the fundamentals. Hey, offensive lineman, come over here. I'm going to teach you how to block. We just won the Super Bowl. Yeah, I'm going to teach you how to block. Hey, DBs, defensive backs, come over here. I'm going to teach you how to tackle. You're going to teach me how to tackle? I've played football all my life. Yeah, we're going to go over the fundamentals. And when he'd go through those, then he'd go to page 1 of the playbook. Okay, we're going to run a draw play. It's like the most basic thing that's ever been done in football. Well, we're going to learn how to do it. That's what he did. He just pounded the fundamentals. I can't take for granted that people know the basics and the fundamentals, so that's what we're going to do. We're really going to lean into this. There was one point, it's reported that Max McGee, who's the guy who scored the first touchdown in the first Super Bowl ever, all-pro wide receiver, Lombardi was going over the basics, the fundamentals, and Max McGee was like, Coach, I just, could you slow down just a little bit? I feel like I'm falling behind here. You're going too fast for us. And Vince Lombardi kind of like, it's reported, cracked a small smile, and then went on teaching the fundamentals. He just was obsessed with it, as any good coach is. So this morning, this is how I'd like to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Bible. Like this is a fundamental, and this is God's word, the scriptures. People call it the word of God or just the word. And here's the crazy thing: if you want to win spiritually in life, then you have to consistently or daily be in the scriptures to some level, to some amount. I won't even in this series dictate how long you need to be in the scriptures. Just some amount, some nugget of time or chunk of time that you spend reading God's word. It is one of the fundamentals of faith, but I would kind of go as far to say is it's the fundamental of all fundamentals. So some people who are like, man, I've been a Christian all my life, or I've grown up in the church, which, I didn't. But if you say that, be like, man, how can you say that, Dan? I'd love to battle with you about it because I like big Bibles, so I'm the guy. I will fight you about this. I think this is the fundamental of all fundamentals. What about prayer? Prayer is really important. It is. It's so important. But here's what's crazy. If you read the Bible, it'll tell you to pray. Isn't that crazy? It's the fundamental of all. What about talking to other people about your faith? There are people who are so far from God, so desperately need a relationship with God. What about that? That's important. It is so important. Jesus calls it the Great Commission. You'll learn about that in the Bible. What about giving and being generous? Like, we live in America. It's so stingy. It's so materialistic. It's so consumeristic. This is crazy. God will teach you about generosity in the scriptures. Man, what about bitterness? Like, so many people, they don't forgive. And God says, if you don't forgive others and deal out grace to others, then I won't deal out grace to you. Guess what? You'll learn that in the scriptures. I mean, it's the fundamental of all fundamentals. This is where you begin. This is where it ends. What about the gospel? The good news story, which is what it's all about. That Jesus came to earth, God in the flesh, died for us on the cross for our sins, and then rose from the dead 3 days later. The scriptures will teach you the gospel. I mean, this is the fundamental of all fundamentals. So in basketball, say like there's an NBA star, somebody who's an all-star, they never move on from the fundamentals, okay? One of the players that I dislike because I'm a Cavaliers fan, Steph Curry, okay? Little baby Curry, still with a binky in his mouth, even though he's in his 30s or whatever. He's just a big crybaby. So, see, it's coming out, isn't it? The hate's coming out. It's football, or it's basketball hate. I basketball hate him. Not in real life, but I basketball hate him. And so he comes out and he dribbles 2 basketballs pregame to get ready and warm up. Have you ever seen this? He does this whole routine, dribbling 2 basketballs. Why does Steph Curry, who is maybe historically the greatest three-point shooter of all time and great with a ball handle, why does he come out and practice dribbling? Doesn't he just say, okay, I think I've done that. I'm not doing that pregame this week. I got dribbling down. No, because it's a fundamental. Like, you never graduate from a fundamental. Does that make sense? A fundamental means you constantly are on it. It's a foundation. So you constantly come. So dribbling, shooting, defense, rebounding, passing, you never move on from that, even when you're an NBA all-star. And here's what I'm saying to you is, even if you've grown up all your life, followed Jesus, as long as you can remember, even if you are an elder at Momentum, even if you're a lead minister at Momentum, even if you're an adult encourager who leads our students in the student ministry, even if you lead kids and Mo Kids, even if you're a sweet grandma who loves Jesus, you never graduate from God's word. It's a fundamental. Just like dribbling in pregame, you have to stay with it constantly, no matter how old you get. You never graduate from daily reps in God's word. So God's word is foundational to, if you want to win spiritually. I mean, if you don't take that seriously, I almost don't have anything else to give you to be like, how do I want to move forward spiritually? Have you started reading God's word? Like, there's so much that it will teach you to help you keep taking next steps. So it's not it, but man, it's the foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a Bible. This is huge, huge this way, but also huge, impact-wise. It's huge. This is a big deal. So turn to Psalm 119. Take as long as you need to find it. It's generally in the middle of the Bible. You'll find the Psalms around there. And it's 119. There's a free paperback Bible in the seat in front of you, or you can download the Bible app for free and turn there. We'll also put some stuff up on the screen. Notice my Bible is so big that when I put it on my music stand starts shrinking. Like it can't even hold my Bible. It's so big. And I love that. I'm proud. I'm very proud of that. So you're going to keep doing that. So this is the longest psalm of the Bible that we're getting into. It's also the longest chapter in the Bible, what we're getting into. And so it towers above all other chapters with 176 verses. A dang. Okay? So it's often been called the Great Psalm because of its size and how awesome it is. And it's more of a poem. Like all psalms are kind of written prayers, but some of them are very poetic. This one is very poetic. Like the words were chosen very carefully in Psalm 119. It's very well crafted. It's also an acrostic psalm, meaning, like if it was in English, it'd be like each stanza starts with A, and then the next stanza starts with B. That's what's happening here in Hebrew with the 27 Hebrew letters. We won't see it, but that's what's happening. It's an acrostic, alphabetical Hebrew psalm. And so it's really interesting. So one buzzword I'll throw out there to define for you is psalmist. Psalmist is just a generic way to say the person that wrote this psalm. He's called the psalmist. And so Psalm 119 is all about a writer slash poet slash psalmist who loves the Bible. He loves the scriptures that he has at his time available to him like I do. He just loves it. And so over and over in Psalm 119, he talks about how he delights in God's word. He says it 9 or 10 times throughout the psalm. So this is how it begins. Psalm 119 begins this way. Verse 1, blessed, by the way, we're not covering all 176 verses today. I saw some nervousness in your eyes, and you might be tired from the holidays, but that woke you up like, please tell me it's not happening. So we're doing a series on it, but we're not even going to cover them all on that. So blessed are those whose ways are blameless, who walk according to the law of the Lord. Blessed are those who keep his statutes and seek him with all their heart. Now, I want to focus first, just like as an appetizer, on the first 3 words. Blessed are those. Okay, so blessed, it's not typically a nuance here is that, people say hashtag blessed, hashtag blessed. Blessed, kind of the idea of blessed is, it means joy-filled. It means satisfied. It means happy. So blessed are those. It's trying to tell us, how can a person in this life that is so mystifying, where happiness is so elusive, how can human beings find joy? And this is telling us, this psalm is not just about God's word, it's about how to find joy as a human being. In fact, blessed is the first word in the entire book of Psalms. So it's kind of the gateway that enters us into the Psalms, and this is a major psalm about how to be a happy person. Does happiness elude you? Maybe some of the mystery here is your spiritual walk with God not being there and needing to lean into that. So this is basically saying, oh, how happy are those who live according to God's word, who follow God's word. The happiness comes from wise choices and wise actions, in God's perspective, wise. And the psalm is about how to be happy, how to prioritize God's word and saturate your life with it. And so a key word here is, blessed are those whose ways are blameless, who walk according to the law of the Lord. Now, that can sound really legalistic, the law of the Lord, and especially if you're familiar with the New Testament, where the law is often juxtaposed against grace. But that's not what it's talking about, that negative connotation of law. Law, the Hebrew word is Torah, and Torah simply means the instruction. It means the instruction of the Lord, or the teaching of the Lord. So it takes away all that legalistic feel. This just means this is God's instruction to mankind. It's the law of the Lord. It's this teaching to people. And so Psalm 119 is a celebration of God's Torah, his teaching. When I first became a Christian, again, unchurched home, I was 15 years old. But I became a Christian, I heard this acrostic that is, I admit, cheesy as Velveeta, but I love it still, and I heard it when I was 15. It is that the Bible is an acrostic that stands for basic instructions before leaving earth. Instruction. That's what Torah is. It's basic instructions. Like, this is the fundamental of all fundamentals. This is the Bible, ladies and gentlemen. Like, this is from God and the mind of God. And so just to be creative, have you ever been writing a paper for school or something? And you're like, man, I keep using the same word over and over because it's a theme word like Torah. It's a theme word. I got to come up with some synonyms, right? I got to look at the thesaurus, and start looking through it and find other words because I don't reuse it. My teacher marks me down. Well, that's what this guy has done creatively. There are 7 other words, 8 total, that are all synonyms of one another that have to do with God's instruction, his Torah. And so he uses them throughout the psalm to kind of switch it up and keep it creative. And so in the first stanza, verses 1 through 8, 7 of those 8 synonyms are used alone just in this first stanza. And so verse 1, blessed are those who walk according to the Torah of the Lord. Verse 2 talks about his statutes. Verse 4, precepts, your decrees, your commands, your righteous laws, and that's actually a different Hebrew word than Torah. And verse 8, your decrees. These are all basically just the instruction of the Lord. And they have some nuances, some small differences, but the overlap is kind of great that these are just synonyms for one another, and that's God's instruction. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a Bible. It's the Torah of God, the decrees, the commands, the precepts, the statutes of God. How many of you have ever heard of a round of applause? Because, again, I'm working to wake you guys up this new year. How many by round of applause have ever heard of Kathy Ireland? Anyone? Okay. If not, means you're young. So Kathy Ireland, world-renowned supermodel, cover girl, crazy successful. In fact, she's been listed by Forbes magazine as one of the most successful women in America, who at the time built up a $420 million fortune. So she's gone from model to mogul. I mean, just a total, transformation of, I think I'm done mostly modeling now, to being a businesswoman and a mogul. So when she was 18 years old, she was living in Paris modeling. And she said, man, I know it might sound glamorous, but I was alone modeling. Like, I'm all the way across the world from my family. I'm alone. It's very lonely. And she said, one night when she was going through her suitcase, she found a Bible in her bag. And she was like, what? How did my mom put this there? Like, her daughter is halfway around the world modeling alone in a foreign city, and her mom's worried about her and whoop, slips the Bible in her bag. She was like, I had never, ever read a Bible. I didn't know how to read a Bible. She said, and I opened up to the book of Matthew, which is the beginning of the New Testament, which is the part that's the most important part, by the way, of the Bible, that's about Jesus, God in the flesh, entering into the world. That's the most important part. The rest is kind of the prequel. And so she opens it up, she starts reading in the book of Matthew, and she was like, man, I've never read this before. And she said this, in my industry at that time, it was filled with a lot of really sketchy guys. I'm going to go ahead and guess that hasn't changed a lot. She said, I was drawn to how powerful Jesus was. She said, I took comfort in the fact how loving and how honoring of women he was. She said, it gave me such comfort. She says, as I'm reading in the middle of the night, she said, I sat there and I thought, I know I'm holding truth in my hands. And I was like, wow, that's really powerful. I've never read this before. I read Jesus, and he's respectful of women when he's a powerful dude, but he didn't abuse his power, and he was loving. He spoke truth directly, but softly, all that stuff. I was holding truth in my hands. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a Bible. It's truth with a capital T. And the funny thing is, the psalmist in Psalm 119 says a couple things that are interesting. He says in verse 151, all your commands are true. In verse 160, all your words are true. Basically the same thing that Kathy Ireland's saying, I knew I was holding truth in my hands. This is what theologians, people who study God and the scriptures, they call the plenary inspiration of the scriptures. Plenary just means the whole thing, the entire work. Everything in here is reliable, trustworthy, and true. But some of the things, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there are some things that are obsolete or nullified because Jesus came along later and made some things obsolete. This is no longer how you worship. You worship more directly. You don't do animal sacrifices and all that because the cross changes a lot of stuff. But everything in here is true and trustworthy. And so Kathy Ireland went on to say, as she grew up, she continued reading the Bible, and she said, there were some things that I read, and I really loved. She said, and other things I would read and say, oh, that must be a typo. You know? And she said, she'd say, that's a different interpretation, or probably it's a cultural thing. Certainly it doesn't pertain to me. She said, so I was picking and choosing what I liked, and I was neglecting the rest of it. I was trying to mold God into what I wanted him to be, rather than just surrendering and letting him make me into the person he made me to be. And so eventually, she says, after years of picking and choosing parts of the Bible, parts of Christianity that she wanted to follow, Kathy Ireland said, man, I just totally surrendered to Jesus. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do what you say and see if it leads to the blessed life. Like, will this actually make me happy? Because it's who I was created to be. Psalm 119:4, right in the middle of the stanza we're in, says, you have laid down precepts that are to be fully obeyed. Now, that's an interesting word, precepts. It's one of the synonyms, right? Okay, so precepts it's kind of helpful, the English word that's chosen by the translators. It's a Middle English word, and it's kind of helpful because it has a prefix on it that's the same as like prescription, something meaning before. And it's all about God's foresight, his foreknowledge. Like, he knows things that will come. And basically, precepts means wisdom. So it's his wisdom with foreknowledge, meaning, man, I know if you choose this and this, it's going to lead to this. I know how I designed you. I know how I designed the world. Or if you do this that I've asked you to do, you do this and this, I know what that's going to lead to, the blessed life. I know that's going to lead to joy and fulfillment and happiness long term. And so God has this foreknowledge that he gives us his precepts to follow his instructions. So for instance, when your mechanic tells you to do something with your car, or when your doctor tells you to do something or not do something with your body, they're not giving you just arbitrary rules, right? They're not just making stuff up to be a bad guy or just to be somebody who throws rules at you. They're just trying to boss you around, Get off me, mechanic. Shut up. You're not the boss of me, That's not what's going on, doctor. Hey, here's one thing. You need to stop eating so much red meat. You need to stop doing this. Dude, you're not the boss of me. Shut up. You're just trying to push me around. No, that's not what's going on. They know your car so well. They know how cars are made. They know your body so well that they're saying, if you do this or don't do this, you're going to break down. Your car is going to break down. Your body is going to break down. It's the same with God. God's precepts, his wisdom to know how things will play out based on how he made you, how he knit you together in your mother's womb. He's like, man, I know. I'm not trying to be an almighty party pooper by telling you don't do this or this. I'm trying to tell you precepts. I know where this leads. You will break down. You'll break down spiritually, mentally, physically. You'll break down. But if you do this, you can live that blessed life. I know where that leads to. And so God is saying, follow my precepts because of my deep love for you. And the psalmist wisely ends this first stanza by saying in verse 8, I will obey your decrees. Like, I get it. You see what's coming and you prescribe instruction for me. This is one of the toughest teachings that we begin in the beginning of the series with, and it'll come up later, is that God's teaching, his Torah, is authoritative in our lives. Now, we don't like the word authority. We don't like that at all. Like, nobody does, not just you, okay? The authority, like authoritative. And what that means is that they have commanding power in our lives. Why? Well, because he's the God who created everything, including you. He's the one who gives you breath to breathe. You're his. He's created you. So he has authority to tell you what to do, how to live, and he knows how he created you. He knows how the car's made and what will make it break down. It's authoritative. So his instruction, his Torah is authoritative, meaning we have to obey God's word if we ever want to actually live the blessed life. Like, not just because I said so, but because it's a God who loves us, and he's like, I authoritatively know and tell you how to live so that you can be happy and fulfilled. But it's not always the way that you think or I think I'll be fulfilled. It's got to be the Torah, God's blessed instruction. And this is interesting. Throughout the psalm, notice this theme here. Here's 3 verses. The psalmist says this, with my lips I recount all the laws that come from your mouth. He says, then, the law from your mouth is more precious to me than thousands of pieces of silver or in gold. Verse 88, in your unfailing love, preserve my life. See, that's in your unfailing love, that I may obey the statutes of your mouth. Where does he keep saying the source of the Torah is? What's the source? Mouth, mouth, mouth. That's saying this is from the mind and the mouth of God Almighty. That's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? Like this is, as we say, as the scriptures say, is God breathed. It's from the mind and the mouth of the creator of the universe. It's his word, his instruction. And the psalmist keeps alluding to that. Like, I love the teaching, the Torah that comes from your mouth, God, that you've given us humans for instruction. It's from the mouth of the King of the universe. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is a Bible. Like, of course you show up at church and you expect a preacher, well, nowadays maybe not, to talk about God's word or the Bible, like, oh, it's a church, yeah, take it for granted. But when you really think about this, it's the inspired, divinely inspired word of God. It is God-breathed from the mind and the mouth of God. You're like, whoa, ladies and gentlemen, this is a Bible. It is huge that we have this. It's huge how we even got it. It's huge that it's been translated and preserved and all this. It's huge that we have manuscript evidence of it. In fact, if you want to go back and find some of the understandings of how can I trust that it's reliable, a couple years ago we did a series on YouTube. You can find it called Footholds. And there's a whole sermon, won't be today, but like an hour long about why you can trust the scriptures. Like, what evidences are there that this is actually the instruction of God himself? And it's a great message if you're like, man, I don't know or understand any of that stuff. But like, what does it mean it was inspired if people wrote it? Well, it's not that someone was sitting at their desk, like some godly dude, whatever, sitting at his desk, and all of a sudden his hand starts involuntarily moving toward the feather pen. Like, what is happening right now? What is going? Grabs the feather pen, dips it in something, goes to the scroll, starts reading. And his eyes start twirling around like a cartoon, that just got hit in the head. And he's like, by the power of Grayskull, what is going on? Right? That's not what it means, that it's inspired, and that someone wrote. The idea is just like theology tells us that that just like Jesus is fully divine and fully human when he walked the earth, the scriptures are fully human. It's a fully human book and a fully divine book, meaning God inspired what he wanted to say to others through a person and used their vocabulary, their experience to say, this is what I want to say to mankind. Here is my instruction. And it was God-breathed. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is a Bible. In fact, the most important scripture, most famous, is 2 Timothy 3:16. By the way, all the 3:16s throughout the Bible tend to be kind of important. It's really interesting. But 2 Timothy 3:16 says, all scripture is God-breathed and what? Useful. This is so practical. This is so practical for living the blessed life, for your relationships, for all that you struggle with mentally and your anxiety, all of it. It is so useful. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a Bible. I want to tell you one more story. It's a great story. I don't think I've ever told this at Momentum. But there was this guy in 2 Kings 22 in the Old Testament, centuries before Jesus came and walked the earth. Awesome story about the 16th king of Judah. And his name is King Josiah, and he was a good king. He became king, catch this, when he was 8 years old. We've heard of stuff like that happening. So some little brat is king of Judah. And like, I want this now. Give me a cookie. And he was the king. You got him a cookie, okay? And so when he was 16 years old, he started seeking God. And we got a lot of teenagers at Momentum, and some of them are seeking God and can relate to. When he was 16, he was like, I want to know God. And so he starts seeking God. And as a result, he went on this mission, because he's king, to say, man, I don't want a bunch of false gods being worshipped. Like, people are making up gods and doing crazy things like sacrificing their kids on altars and all kinds of stuff to these man-made gods. And often they would do it up on hills in the high places where they'd build their altars to false gods, these things called Asherah poles. And he was like, okay, I'm the king, not on my watch. I'm going to get rid of all these. So we got a bunch of his buddies together. They got on horseback. I picture they put on masks, and they put on the purge alarms, like, just real creepy and eerie, like, what's going on? And King Josiah starts riding with his dudes. So they go up these hills, and he just starts wrecking these altars and these Asherah poles, all these pagan things set up to worship fake gods with a little g, and he just starts wrecking shop throughout his kingdom, and it's just this big purge that happens. So the biggest thing that happens that I love is when he's 26 years old. He's trying to renovate and restore the temple of God that's in Jerusalem. And they're carpenters, builders, masons, and they're paying through it. They're paying for it all with the taxes of the people. And so it was huge. It was on HGTV in Judah at this time. Big deal, just like how they fixed it up, renovated it. Looked real tight. And so King Josiah sends a secretary and says, I want you to go to the temple. I want you to send a message to the high priest and kind of work out with him. Tell him, hey, this is all being paid for. That, we've got money for this, allocated for this. Just keep doing what you're doing. So the secretary of the king shows up to the temple, to the high priest, and this is how I picture it happening. The high priest comes out, and he's like, just come off this discovery. He comes up to the secretary, and he's like, hey, when we were going through the temple, the high priest says, we found something in like an old cabinet or something. It's kind of busted up, and we were in there digging around, and we found this. Now, it was a scroll, but the way it translates for us is to help us understand it. They call it a book. It was really a scroll, and he's like, found this scroll, and I got to tell you, it's weird, but this is the Torah of the Lord. And the secretary's like, what? He's like, yeah, we found God's word. Like, we found the scriptures. Like, what? So do you understand what that means? Like, all this time, no one had been reading God's word. All this time, no one had been teaching God's word. Therefore, no one had been obeying God's word. They don't even know what God says. They're just making assumptions about what God says. Nobody's in the Torah at all. And so they're off worshiping these false gods and creating false gods and sometimes sacrificing their kids to false gods and all this stuff. And so the secretary does what anyone would typically do. He's like, it's God's Torah. It's his word. I'm going to read it. And so he leaves and he starts reading it. He's like, this is crazy. Like, this is what God has to say to mankind. And so he goes back to the king, King Josiah, and he goes up to him. He's like, hey, your highness, this is nuts, but I talked to the high priest. I said what you wanted to say, but look what he gave me. Your highness, this is a Bible. And the king looks at it and sees this is the Torah, the instruction of God. And the king rips his clothes, which is a sign of great regret and anguish. Like, I'm the leader. This happened on my watch. He's like, and just a sign of great mourning. And so he asked Josiah, start reading it to me. And Josiah starts reading God's word to him and starts telling him what God says to people. And the king is like, man, I have totally dropped the ball. And so he calls all the people from least to great, anyone who can come to Jerusalem, come to the palace. And when everybody gathers around, he just starts reading God's word to them. He's like, you guys, check this out. This is a Bible. My bad. Like, I haven't been teaching this to you. No one, the priests haven't been, they couldn't find it. It was in a freaking cabinet in the temple. And so he just starts reading to them. And the people there, along with the king, they rededicate themselves to knowing and following God and to seeking him and listening to his word and obeying. They renew a covenant with God, an agreement. You will be my God. I will be your person. We will be your people. And then to kind of end it off, King Josiah is like, okay, you know what? A lot of stuff has been going on in the last 10 years since I did this last. There's way more false gods because we weren't listening to the God. And he's like, all right, I can get my buddies together. Let's get on our horses, put the mask on. Purge alarm goes off again. And they go up to the high places and they just start wrecking again. Like, we got to get rid of these altars, get rid of all this stuff that we conceived God was. And we're going to follow the Lord for real. And they even started doing something, celebrating something called the Passover again, which was the biggest event in Israel's history ever. The Passover, Egypt, they were slaves. And they're like, we didn't know about the Passover because we didn't know God's word, his Torah, and he tells us to observe it. Okay, so this month, as I like big Bibles, why that theme? Well, here's the reason for it. It's simply this, is because biblical illiteracy is not just prevalent in America. biblical illiteracy is prevalent in our churches now. It is prevalent. It's not like, hey, those people out there. It's like, no, these people in here. We're biblically illiterate generally. Like the idea is just like the word of God has been lost like it was in Josiah's time. No one knows it. They only think they know it because of what they hear on sitcoms and what's going on in political debates and all this kind of stuff. No one's going to God's word itself to say, what does God teach us in his Torah? What does he instruct us? What does he say? And so as a result, we're getting closer and closer to a generation that doesn't know God's word at all. And even in my lifetime, and I'm young as flip, people, even in my lifetime, I've seen it happening. Churches know the Bible less and less, focus on the Bible less and less. What does God actually say to us? Here's what I'd like it to say. Here's my agenda. But what does God say? And so the question for us throughout the series is, are we going to let that happen on our watch? And it's not about going on Facebook and making angry posts about this and what things should be. It's about us sitting down and getting daily reps with the foundational things of God's word. And so my prayer is just simply, will you discover or rediscover the scriptures this month, the beginning of the year, like King Josiah did and his people did? Will you commit or recommit yourself to a relationship with God? Like, God, I'm going to pursue you. I'm going to try to understand your love for me, the good news of Jesus, your grace for me. I've made assumptions about what kind of God you are. I've not gone to your Torah to see what you have to say to me, to know what you actually think about me. And maybe it'll motivate you to go home, and say, man, I feel like it's time to start wrecking shop. Like to go home, put on the mask, and just be like, man, there's some stuff I got to delete off my computer, off my phone, some pills I got to flush down the toilet. Maybe there's someone I got to break up with because all they do is lead me away from God. Whatever it is, to say I got stuff that's distracting me from God, and I got to do a purge in my life and say, God, I want to seek you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is huge. God has communicated with us. This is a Bible. Let's pray.